The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the DCL and RSI Content Solutions webinar series, Reality Check, The Truth from a Publisher's Perspective. We will begin our program shortly. The Truth from a Publisher's Perspective. My name is Marianne Callahanna, and I'm the Director of Marketing at RSI Content Solutions. I will be moderating today's program. Quickly, we'll go over the agenda items today. We're going to start with a brief background on our sponsors, a little bit of information on the survey that we conducted. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then they'll take it over to provide analysis interpretation of the survey results. We are going to save a lot of time at the end to answer any questions you have, so please note that throughout the webinar you may submit questions at any time via the GoToWebinar dialog box. Finally, this webinar is being recorded. One of our sponsors today is DCL, and DCL stands for Data Conversion Laboratory. DCL is a leader in organizing, converting, and moving content to modern formats for wide access and new revenue streams. With expertise across many industries, DCL's proprietary technology, matched with its US-based project management team, solves clients' complex conversion challenges. DCL started in 1981 and continues to future-proof content for government, publishers, nonprofits, as well as a variety of other verticals. DCL services help refine an organization's document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy documents and future documents for needs today and in the future. Our second sponsor is the company I work for, RSI Content Solutions. RSI started in 2000 as a consulting company, helping publishers primarily with XML and content management related technologies. Today, we are a software company that serves more than 150 clients worldwide. We are proud of our customer success, and we are thrilled to receive industry recognition for some of the work we've done over the years. RSI CMS is RSI's enterprise content management system that was designed specifically for publishers. RSI CMS is used to store, manage, edit, and deliver content. In 2006, the first version of RSuite was released. Today, RSuite serves a number of publishing verticals, including scientific, technical, and medical, educational publishers, scholarly publishers, religious publishers, and many more. Some of the world's leading publishers use RSuite CMS, and some publishers who you may not be familiar with use the system as well. So a little bit of background on the survey. Many of you, we thank you for your input. You did take part in the survey. Others are here to hear the results. But what we wanted to do is we really wanted to get input from the field on and compare the perceptions versus the reality around topics like XML adoption, CMS adoption, shifting of revenue streams from primarily print revenue to digital revenue, multi-channel publishing, and workflow automation. So those are some of the topics that were discussed and questioned during the survey. And this slide shows a recap of who actually took the survey. We had 136 publishing and industry executives who took part in our survey, and we view this as a high-level response to we can take away from this trends from our audience. You can see that the large number of people who responded were association publishers. That does speak to the audiences we serve, as well as the audience did self-select. So I know that there is some overlap between how someone might identify as an STM publisher and as another, or education and training. But like I said, the big takeaway is that we can conclude trends from this audience. I am thrilled to have here with me today the CEO of RSI Content Solutions, Barry Bealer, and the CEO of Data Conversion Laboratory, Mark Gross. Both gentlemen have spent their careers serving the information and publishing software industry. So welcome, Barry and Mark. The first question we pose to our audience is, where in your publishing workflow do you use XML? 17% responded that they generate XML after the print product goes to press. 41% said they have an XML early workflow. 29% explained that they don't currently use XML, but they want to start. 2.4% simply don't understand the value of XML, and 10% were unsure if they use XML anywhere in the workflow. So now I'm happy to bring Barry and Mark into the conversation. And Barry, could you share with us your observations on these metrics?
Well, thank you, Marianne, and thank you to everybody who is on the webinar who has participated in the survey as well. Just a couple observations about this slide in particular. You know, we find that certain types of publishers have embraced XML and others are slower adopters, and that's just natural due to the types of publications they have. We generate post-XML is indicative of a journal publisher from our experience, where an XML early workflow, which is frankly a fairly large majority of the respondents here, is indicative of more of a book publisher. In particular, reference publishers have really adopted this XML early workflow, at least in our experience. I'm a little bit surprised that it's at 41%. In our experience, it's not quite that high, but in this survey, it certainly is. And then finally, another one that's somewhat surprising and hopefully continues to diminish is around we don't use XML, but we want to. Obviously, it takes an investment to get your content into XML, and that trend has been increasing over the last decade or so. And I think you'll continue to see that diminish with the ongoing pressures to move to digital.
Mark, what are your big takeaways from this question and the responses?
Okay, well, thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Barry. And I also want to thank everybody who responded on this survey. It was very helpful. I think there's a couple of points here. First, I think if you add up the first two bars, people who are using XML post-print and early, you're at almost 60%, which is an encouraging number. It also surprised me that it was that high. It means that the majority of people that are involved, and again, I guess some self-selecting in the survey, but still, it's quite an impressive number. And even the XML early adopted 41%. I'm not sure much of that's probably, in my experience, that's not really XML first necessarily. It means that XML is being used early in the process. I think it's all a reflection of what we'll see in the next few slides of just to stay in the business and to be and to take advantage of all the new opportunities. More and more publishers are seeing the need for using XML just for the flexibility it affords, and there'll be more and more that I suspect if we looked at this chart next year, it'll probably the combined first two bars will probably be closer to 70 or 75%, and go up from there. It's only 2.4% who don't understand the value of XML, which is also a surprising number because I would think more people would say that. So that is very encouraging. I think it's all. I think we just see a general trend of knowledge and the importance of XML being used.
Indeed. Oops, I'm sorry. And this next slide, I think this slide speaks directly to the 2.4% who don't understand the value of XML. But additionally, we think this chart illustrates that it's no longer just about publishing to print and digital. It's publishing to print and multiple flavors of ebook, websites, apps, PDFs, and all at the same time. So if you're on this webinar, this story is not unfamiliar. You know this. I thought it was interesting. I was speaking with an R-Suite customer this week, and he told me that on average, each title that they produce has 5 different ebooks. Really the only option to sustain and ultimately prosper in a multi-channel publishing world. Our next question asks the audience to select all the outputs that you currently publish to. So we're gonna look at the now view and then what publishers expect to support in the future, and then we're going to compare those two. So right now, 36% respondents said they need to publish to online courses. Just about 47% are publishing to licensing channels, 40% aggregators, 33% apps, 86% to print, 85% to web, and about 70% to ebooks. Now, in the future, 55% predict that online courses are going to be a necessary output, 50% selected licensing, 49% aggregators, 55% apps, 82% print, 89% web, and 83% selected ebooks. So let's compare these projections with what publishers are supporting now and what the anticipated future outputs to support are. So this is a side-by-side comparison, and Mark, why don't you start out and share your observations on these increases and in one instance decrease?
Sure. Well, I think the decrease is a little remarkable, that only 3.7% said that they see a decrease in print. Though I think the more, I mean, just the way the question is phrased, we're really asking how many people see, how many of these channels will be used. So I guess pretty much everybody will be using print. This is really show how much less print each of them will be using. I think what's significant here is how many people are actually saying they're using 4, 5, 6 channels right now, and that, I think that's happened very, very quickly. I mean, I don't think 2 years ago anybody was talking about apps. Here, a third of the people say they're using apps today, and certainly more more will come aboard. I mean, just taking apps as an example, it's inevitable that it'll be, the reason that it's only a third right now is because they're so hard to produce and so expensive to produce. But that, I'm sure, will be changing over the next year or two as better tools come along. So, you know, what's showing for the future now is showing really what I think is of slight increases. I think this is a total underestimate of what we're going to see a year from now. And I think it would be very interesting to redo these same questions here and see what happens. Let's see how far off I am. But I think what's remarkable is that the trend right now is for multiple channels on everything, and that's just expanding because the more channels you use, the more opportunities you're taking advantage of.
Yes. Barry, what's your insight into some of these numbers?
Certainly very similar to what Mark had just stated, but just a few other observations around it. I mean, if you look at the largest change around apps, I mean, apps you can drill down into, and I'm sure there's many flavors here that we could talk about, but apps in particular could mean an e-reader, it could mean a mobile device, and we'd have to, you know, further dissect the information or ask additional questions around this to truly understand which direction people are going. And the other one, the online courses, the increase of just over 18%, is directly in line with what Outsell, which is an analyst firm in the information industry, has been stating for some time, which is the information industry is going to go through this gamification, if you will, which is taking content and being able to create these online courses and be able to create online tests and things of that nature. So this is right in line with the trends that several of the analyst firms have been predicting. I can say it's interesting to see, as Mark said, that print is not declining faster. I'm sure this would be a different story if we were talking about the news industry per se, versus, say, a book or journal publisher.
Yeah, I think just one more point before we get off this slide. Several of these are really directed outside of what the publisher is doing themselves. Both licensing and aggregating is really talking about providing information outside to other people who are going to be reselling the information, which is really, you know, just a whole new set of markets that people are able to reach now with all these new tools. There's another reason that the moving to XML becomes so important.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Okay. The next question is regarding, I'm sorry, I'm having a couple little glitches here. The next question is regarding XML conversion and specifically converting backlist titles into XML. 46% said that their biggest roadblock was a limited budget. 49% said lack of resources. 10% were confused with all the outsourcing options. 34% expressed that they did not feel that there was any clear ROI for converting backlist titles into XML. And 22% had trouble putting together a convincing business case. Mark, how do you interpret this?
Well, I would focus on the last two items, because if there's no clear ROI, there's no return on investment seen or convincing business, then it doesn't matter what the budget is or what the resources are. It doesn't pay to do it. So I think especially with backlists, I think more and more people, where 5 years ago I wasn't seeing this, more and more organizations and companies are just seeing the value of their backlists and titles that they created 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago that they thought had no market, and suddenly they're seeing that because of what's going on in the industry, because of the ability to distribute information so inexpensively electronically, and the ability to be discoverable to such a much larger audience, suddenly these items have a lot of value. I mean, I've got associations that we're doing work for that are converting and putting online technical papers that were written 30, 40 years ago, which they never thought was an asset, but because instead of a few hundred people knowing about them, now millions of people can know about, and suddenly there's a market. So I think that's the first piece of just, and you really can't know until you test some of this out, because the natural instinct might say, oh, who would look at this paper, or who would want this book? But but there is a tremendous demand, and that's what I think my customers are finding. So once you've got that, the rest of it becomes, then you have to figure out how to, it's not so much what the budget is or the resources. It really becomes what is it going to cost to be able to create that opportunity? And I think that's really the message of this particular question in this slide.
Yeah. Okay. Before we go to the next question in the survey, I wanted to share with the audience a slide that Barry put together to illustrate something we call the 4 phases of digital publishing transformation. We've seen our customers traverse these phases as they navigate to a successful multi-channel publishing process. And I'm going to let Barry speak to these phases and the difference between print and digital.
Sure, thanks, Marian. So about 2 years ago for our R-Suite user conference, I put this slide together because there was a lot of buzz around traditional print publishers seeing an erosion of that print revenue and digital revenue increasing. So I developed this slide to kind of put a box around what is exactly happening here. So if you look to the left with the planning phase, this is really when a publisher is experiencing some erosion around print, and they're experimenting with digital products or digital distribution of their content. The next phase, the realization phase, is when there is some type of crisis underway, where the print is eroding much faster than expected. However, they start to see an increase in that digital revenue. And then the next phase over, the survival phase, is really where that inflection point is, where digital revenue starts to increase faster than the print revenue declining. And then to the right is the new world phase. So that's where obviously you're gaining tremendous amount of revenue from digital, and print has gotten to a certain point, a low point, where it's plateaued. Obviously, this doesn't represent every single type of publisher. This is just in generalities with respect to what we've seen in the industry and how to explain what publishers are starting to go through. And this is really just a setup for the next couple slides when it comes to the questions that were asked in the survey.
Yeah,
Before you go off that slide, I just wanted to make a point, because when I saw it, I thought that this really relates to a lot of other. There's a book that was written about 15 years ago, The Innovators Dilemma by Clayton Christensen, which has since been updated, but sort of points to the same kind of thing in just about every industry. As technologies change, established companies are often very slow to adapt because they've got too much invested in what's going on. But if they wait till what Barry shows as a survival phase, which is what often happens, they'll never be able to catch up because others will. So I think this is a very good illustration, very good slide showing that the experience of other industries really bears very directly to what's going on in various areas of publishing in terms of the movement to electronic. I mean, it's those who are moving ahead before it becomes too late are the ones, I think, are the ones who are going to be able to get past that survival phase. And I think this just shows it very well.
Yeah. And it really is a great introduction to this next question, where we ask publishers when they expect or when do they project digital revenue to exceed print revenue. And 34% of the people who took our survey said that they are already there. 5% project within the next year. 26% are projecting in the next 3 years. About 15% in more than 3 years. And 19% do not expect digital to exceed print. And that could really be for a variety of reasons. But Barry, I know you have some really relevant observations on these numbers.
Well, again, if you take a look at it, just to echo what you said, 34%, we are already there, higher than I had anticipated, to be honest. But if you really look at where publishers are at, so if they're already there up to the next 3 years, you're really looking at about 65, 66% of the market where digital is exceeding print. I think it's indicative of the demographic of the folks who are taking the survey. So we have folks who are book and journal publishers where electronic is a natural output of their printing process, so or their publication process. So it's a little bit of a surprise that many of our publishing clients or the folks who have completed this survey are seeing that the digital is going to be ahead of print. And maybe that shouldn't be so much of a surprise to me. And Mark is closer from an XML content standpoint, seeing the adoption of XML in the industry. But I just felt 66% over the next 3 years will be at higher, greater revenue for digital than print products. And then the other thing around the 19.3%, we'd really have to dive into that, why they don't anticipate digital exceeding print, and the types of publishers they are.
Yeah. Mark, can you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it really does depend on the type of publisher they are, although I think I was also surprised by 34% saying they're already there, but I was also surprised by that only 26% thought it'll be over the next 3 years, because it's just things are moving so quickly in the industry that I anticipate that within 3 years it'll be close to 100%. It'll be getting more majority of their revenue from digital. It's just I mean, there are certain places where that's not going to happen. You know, very graphical books perhaps, and children's books, and very specialized kind of markets and religious markets. And I mean, I think people will still use a Bible rather than putting it on their iPad. But I think just about every other industry, it's really going to move in that direction very quickly. And it is industry by industry. I think it was about 10 years ago that one of my clients told me that they had just gotten to the point where they were making more money digitally than print, and that was 10 years ago in that particular market. It was a reference publisher. But I think already 10 years ago, many legal publishers were finding everything was electronic. Law firms were getting rid of their libraries and digitizing them. And I'm seeing that now in various areas where organizations are digitizing their libraries. So I think unless things are very graphically oriented and you really like the tactile feel of that book, I think it'll be well upwards of 90% that we'll be seeing the revenues there. And if not, somebody else will come in and then be selling to that market. So I think that the future is being understated over here.
Mm-hmm. Well, we do know that this is going to become a multi-year study on our part, so it'll be interesting to track year over year. Okay, the next question is starts to focus in on content management systems, and we asked, do you plan to implement a content management system in the next 6 months? And 47% declared that they already have one. 18% are undecided. 15% said yes, and 20% said no, they don't plan to implement a CMS. Barry, why don't you take us through these numbers?
Well, you know, my first reaction is we hear this trend of digital, 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 and delivering in digital, and yet there may not be a sense of urgency around putting the right technology in place to be able to deliver that content digitally. So when 38%, if you look at the no or undecided, you know, when you look at 38% are really not moving forward in an expedient fashion, you have to question whether or not they're embracing that digital first type initiative. So just an interesting observation. So again, you know, we see a number of publishers really pushing forward because digital revenue is increasing. This says to me that their manual processes are at a breaking point. And the only way they're going to be able to push through the volume of content that they need to get it into a digital format is by, frankly, adding people to that workflow and to that process. So it becomes a matter of having the right volume of people to convert that content manually, which obviously becomes very costly. So the good news is almost 50% of people, you know, already have one. That's great. I'm sure they're using it in the most efficient fashion, trying to push that content through the system. and the rest of the folks are still trying to figure out what's the best approach to things. Obviously the yes, the 15%, are starting to look around and are looking towards how do they satisfy that digital first initiative.
All right. And then, so follow up to that slide is what are, or what were your biggest roadblocks to purchasing a CMS? And 40% expressed that it's the cost is the major concern. 13% said there are too many technology choices. 17% said that internal IT mandates their solutions and tools. And the same amount said that there was really no clear ROI for CMS investment. And 15% have trouble putting together a convincing business case to take up to their executives.
Well, I could certainly talk about this slide probably for the next 2 hours, but I'll keep it short. Just a few observations. One, around no clear ROI or putting a business case together, no convincing business case. In our experience, in most cases, a publisher has a payback period of about a year on their investment of a CMS. 10 years ago, if the payback period was 3 years, people were happy. Today, it's a year or less. So you should be able to put a compelling business case together to implement a CMS. I realize that's somewhat of a biased answer because we have a CMS product, but the reality is, people will have to invest in a tool that is going to get them into the digital world. And if they make that investment, they should be able to recoup that investment in less than a year. Overall cost to implement, certainly understand this concern. I really do, from the perspective of publishers investing in a CMS product. However, I will say that if you are a $100 million company, I'll guarantee you are not running your business on spreadsheets. You have some type of business automation, whether it's a J.D. Edwards system or some other IBM system, to manage your finances. The same is true for your core business. Where you're managing very complex content, you need to invest in that technology to be able to develop the efficiencies you need so that your time to market is decreased. And that's just the reality the publishers are in today, where they need to create digital content and deliver that content a lot quicker than 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. It's all about speed and getting that time to market quicker.
Yeah, I think I'd like to address, actually, I don't sell the software products. I don't have the bias. I'm not biased. I agree very much with what Barry's saying, but I'd like to take a look at it from the opportunity point of view and really what's happening. Because just moving to XML or to electronic publishing is not what really needs a CMS, because files are files, and if you were able to handle it before with spreadsheets, maybe you could handle it now with spreadsheets. But the opportunity when you move to XML and to the kind of products we're talking about and being able to go to multi-channels is that you can start splitting apart your content into many pieces. And it's not just one linear book. It's many pieces that you could put together. And then you can produce many different kinds of products that are specialized to different markets and different collections of information. And you're able to sell to niche markets who are not interested in the whole collection, but interested in pieces of it. And I think once you're starting to look at the different pieces and the opportunities that presents, that already you can't do with spreadsheets. It's just not. And it's so what I would relate to these slides versus the other ones. I think more and more a very large number of people are talking about XML as something they're seeing. Not quite as many are seeing the CMS. That just may be where you are in using the XML. I think the first step is just some adoption of the XML and that philosophy. But once you see the opportunities, the CMS is what lets you take advantage of those opportunities very quickly and to be able to jump on them and really create revenues much more quickly. And just another observation, although a CMS is a large one-item purchase, when you really when you look at it over the number of pages you're producing, it's really one of the smaller costs involved. Really, it's it could be pennies per page versus the multiples of that it costs to produce and create and design content and sell content. So it's first of all a good investment. Second of all, maybe the only way to really be able to create these products quickly enough and inexpensively enough to take advantage of the opportunities.
Mark, just to add to that real quickly, one of our R-Suite clients came up to us at our user conference this year, and they obviously had implemented our R-Suite software, but they were able to develop, as you were talking about, a new product, a derivative product that wasn't even conceived 12 months ago. Mm-hmm. They developed a new product on the fly and started to sell it, and it incrementally generated $2 million worth of revenue. That product wasn't even conceived of 12 months ago at the previous user conference, and that's how fast he was able to get the product defined and delivered and generating revenue.
It just shows, I think, that we really underestimate what the future has in store, because you can, that would not have been in that 5-year plan or even that 1-year plan. It's just this lets you take care of opportunities as you see them, which might just show up tomorrow.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so we wanted to understand what the pain points are right now with the current publishing process at these organizations. So 34% express they don't have a centralized workflow. 54% explained that they're not able to produce content efficiently to all channels. Just about the same amount, 54, just a little under 54%, said that their content is not in a flexible format to efficiently repurpose and reuse. 63% said there are too many manual steps in the editorial and production processes. And 10% said it takes too long to get XML from their conversion vendors. So there's a lot going on here. Mark, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Sure. Obviously, the 10% who take too long to get XML are not our customers, but we'll leave that. I think, if you look at the other numbers, it would be interesting to correlate it's almost the opposite of the numbers of people that have XML and have CMSs in place. And I think all these centralized workflow and efficient processing, those two really relate to needing some kind of workflow system, which is what a CMS really provides. And I think coming through the ranks, and if you've been publishing for 5, 10, 15 years, you've been doing it a certain way and maybe not have those kind of centralized processes in place. And those will help dramatically. And the same thing with that other one, too many manual steps along. Well, that's, a CMS by itself doesn't help with that so much. I mean, it's a tool, but really it provides a way, it provides a tool to let you streamline the rest of the flows. I mean, I've seen too many publishers, and of course everybody's a publisher now, so it's not just people who have publishing after their name, that have too many manual steps in the editorial process, because that's the way they've always been doing it, and have added pieces and pieces as they went along. Going back through that, there's lots of opportunities usually to improve the process. And the third item, content in flexible format, I think that's what we've been talking since the beginning. I mean, the XML is not the only flexible format, but it's available and it's there and it's been time tested. But it is a way to really improve the flexibility. And publishing from most traditional sources just doesn't provide enough flexibility when you have to work with very large masses of information. And that's the 2 cents on this side.
Barry?
I mean, obviously the largest bar there is around too many manual steps, which to me immediately says expense. So publishers understand that their publishing processes are expensive. And the only way you're going to be able to bring that cost down is to automate. And as Mark said, not every step could be automated. We recognize that. But you automate through transformations. You automate through being able to push review cycles and streamline those review cycles. And in many cases, and I'll give you a CMS perspective, in many cases when publishers do implement a CMS, it's an opportunity for them to rethink their publishing processes through levels of automation. So seeing this is not a surprise of too many manual steps. I'd like to correlate how many of those folks are too many manual steps and that are not looking for a CMS, because obviously they're living with the old publishing processes. And the other thing is, this is interesting too, 54% say we're not able to produce content efficiently to all channels. Well, if you go back several slides, almost everybody said they needed to publish to multiple channels. So we have 50% of the people saying, yes, we need to publish to multiple channels, but we don't do it efficiently. Therefore, that's hitting their profitability. While the other 50% roughly sounds like they're doing it in a more profitable, more flexible manner.
And so related to that is the concept of workflow automation. And we asked our group places in the organization where they would like to automate processes. And 69%, no surprise, said editorial and production workflows. 65% selected content conversion. 69% wants to automate to cross-channel delivery, licensing channels, the iPad, ebook, web, etc. And 39% they want to automate around style changes throughout a document set. So Barry, why don't you share your analysis on this?
Well, certainly no surprise here. All these are relevant. Editorial and production workflows goes back to the manual processes, right? And again, I'll go back to a workflow tool is not going to take care of cultural issues that you have within your publishing organization. It'll help streamline your publishing process, but the biggest thing is your publishing organization needs to be ready for change. In every project that we get into, there's three elements. There's the people, the process, and the technology. And we've often said the technology is not the issue today. It's the people and the process, and it takes time and money to really think through your editorial and production processes. Then you can automate them. A tool is just not the be-all, end-all. You really have to think through how do you want to produce your content, and that may mean moving XML first or moving XML early. But the bottom line is a workflow tool is great, but it doesn't do anything until you really think through your publishing processes.
All right. And Mark, can you add?
Yeah, I think that this really outlines pretty nicely that you may not need to do everything at once to improve your processes. I mean, I think every organization, certain things stick out as the real problem. In one organization, it's content conversion, how to get lots of content in, and maybe that's the place to focus on. Other places, it's how to get the output out and the content delivery and being able to produce things, and others, it's the production workflows. And I think doing all that at once may be too much. I mean, I think you still you need the same tools in place to do that. I think CMS is pretty important to have to solve any of these, and I think a flexible publishing environment, and we've been talking about XML all day today. But once those are implemented, that's not going to solve everything at once, but that gives you the tools to start picking at them one at a time to the ones that really will give you the most, lets you open up the most opportunities the most quickly, and that depends on what your organization is doing and where the particular problems are. I think this highlights nicely. First of all, 1/2 of the people said each one of these is a problem, but you don't have to do it all at once.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to open the floor to any questions you'd like to ask Mark or Barry. Please simply submit the question via the GoToWebinar dialog box. If we don't get to all the questions today, we are happy to contact people after this webinar. As a reminder, a recording to this webinar will be delivered to your inbox, and the slides will be available. You can just go on either of our websites and get a link to those. So I'm going to leave this slide up while we go through some of the questions. One of the final slots on the survey, we just asked people to share what's the most important thing you can do for your organization next year. And a lot of the responses we received are exactly what we were talking about today. So I thought these would be something interesting to look at. Barry, one question that came in, and I wonder if you can address, is what trends in publishing do you think we'll see in the next few years?
Well, you know, again, just based on our survey and some of the information I've been reading, multi-channel publishing you're going to continue to hear. And I think you're going to continue to hear the increase in mobile devices. And as we know, mobile devices can take a number of different flavors. The challenge is going to be for publishers is to essentially get to a media-neutral format, and that's obviously XML, and then to be able to publish this content out to multiple channels. None of us here have a crystal ball to say, what is that next cool device that the industry is going to have to respond to? You know, if you go back 5 years ago, there wasn't an iPad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the iPad comes about. Now everybody's building apps to go onto the iPad. You know, mobile devices will continue to evolve. So these device manufacturers are going to come up with newer and newer devices that we have to, as a publishing industry, respond to. But being able to react to those types of new devices is going to be a challenge for the publishers unless they have their content in an interchange format like XML.
Mark, do you have any additional trends that you?
Well, I think the only trend is the important trend is I don't think we know what the trends are, but we have to retain the flexibility to be able to meet them. Because just in terms of, you know, obviously, very clear, mobile devices are catching the world by storm, and they're going to increase. But we don't even know what form those are going to take. I mean, a couple of years ago, I saw an interesting device that was it was like a projected onto a person's glasses, so the person so a mechanic can just have a heads-up display while he's working on an engine, which, you know, we didn't think, you know, that was a pretty interesting device. But, you know, just last year I read about how Air Force pilots now have retinal displays that actually project right on the retina. And I was joking the other day about how we'll have implants that you'll skip the whole projector phase. But we don't know what any of those things are going to be. But if the data we're collecting is flexible, then meeting those new challenges will be much, much easier. And then, because you really will have to react to them much quicker than we've had to in the past. You don't have a year or 2 or 3. You're going to have months sometimes to be able to react to what people are using. So I think that's really, the flexibility is very important.
All right. Barry, I think this question is applicable to you. What in-house skill sets are needed to support a digital-first workflow?
Well, it certainly depends on the type of publisher, but, you know, from what we've seen is, you know, when a publisher does implement a CMS for a digital-first initiative, they do start to change jobs and positions in how they publish. So someone who used to sit down and work with pages, physically printed pages, no longer does that. They may have to go onto the computer now and work with an editor. The good news is the tools that are out there today are becoming more and more Wordlike. So there's no special skill per se to work in that environment because the XML tags are hidden. But, you know, overall, a general sense or knowledge around content and structure of content is important. XML obviously would be preferred, but just an overall understanding of how that content is structured, their internal DTD or whether they've embraced an industry standard DTD is important. Again, these might be some foreign acronyms to folks, but the point is that it is a change, and you have to reallocate your staff to embrace this digital-first initiative. But the reality is I think that the tools have come a long way, so it's not scary XML they have to edit. It's more so a Word-like interface, but also they should have a deep understanding of the content structure, which is extremely important.
All right.
Yeah, one more thing, one more skill set that's really needed. I think many of the skills, I mean, writing and clear writing and the core of it is really not that different. But I think that the trend now, especially with being able to redo many kinds of products, is to be able to write in a more modular fashion, so that the same content can be reused in many different places, rather than what we have now, where people will write the same paragraph slightly different, in 100 different places.
Right.
So I think that idea, the part about be able to collaborate with others and not own a whole document, and be able to write in a way that those paragraphs or that whole section can also fit someplace else, is a skill that people will need to learn. It will be very, very helpful as we move into this technology.
Right. I'm just going to move on to a summary slide so people can read this as I ask the next question. And Mark, I'm going to throw this one to you. A few people have asked questions around XML compared with HTML5. What are your thoughts on the two different formats?
So I think it really depends on what people are going to be doing with the content, and if they have a clear vision, HTML5 is easier to produce, because it's really it looks like the page. It looks like it's designed for the mobile devices that are out there right now. But it doesn't really, it doesn't have the, if people are really going to the 5 or 6 different channels we talked about in the first few slides, it really doesn't have that same level of flexibility. HTML5 will be good to put on the website. It'll be good for your iPhone and your iPad, but it won't necessarily go to the aggregators. It won't go to licensees very well, because they're going to want a more sophisticated kind of XML. So I think it really goes down to where you're looking the future to be. I think the maximum flexibility will be from an XML environment. The quickest, easiest way to get started would probably be that HTML5, but it's not going to be quite as flexible in the long term.
Okay. Another question, this one is targeted to Barry. Is it possible to have a hybrid solution with some of the publishing program using XML and other publications using a traditional method, but then sharing some of that content?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. It goes back to a comment that Mark made a little while ago, which is, take incremental steps to address some of your publishing challenges. And so, yeah, you can absolutely take things and put side by side new versus traditional, eventually getting to the point of everything being in one system, so that you can create some efficiencies around that. So there really shouldn't be a challenge having the two of them. It's just understanding what content lives where.
Mm-hmm. Also, when you mentioned MS Word-like tools,
mm-hmm.
Can you comment on Word's XML factors? And
sure. So I am by no means an MS Word expert, but from our engineering team, there's always been this view of Microsoft Word as producing very dirty XML, if you will, for lack of a better descriptor, and it's not clean. Can it get there? Yes, but it's rudimentary XML. What we've seen is some of the XML editors, like Oxygen, for example. Oxygen has created an applet that's a browser-based user interface that is very Word-like now, and you can turn on the user interface to look like a heavy-duty XML editor, or you can turn it on to be very Word-like. So these companies who are producing these XML editors have pushed their products to the point of you have a choice now to really edit that XML in a deep fashion and really look at the XML, or to be looking at like a Word-based interface. So they've come a long way from when they first came out several years ago.
Okay. Next question, the same question goes to each of you for different reasons. So, Barry, what are the variables in determining ROI for CMS initiative?
You know, I have a little bit of difficulty answering this question only from the perspective of we have, submitted proposals to RFPs that want to know what the ROI is. The reality is, and I hate to be this blunt, but the reality is most companies really don't calculate ROI, and they don't calculate it correctly. I am completely unaware of companies who say I need an ROI in X number of years and then actually sit there and monitor it every year and come back in 3 years and say, yes, we met our ROI. It just doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Things move too fast. What I think most people are looking for is a payback period. If I invest $100,000 in a CMS, when am I going to gain $100,000 of efficiencies or generate $100,000 of revenue? That's really what they're looking for. So I can sit there and justify to my executive team, if I invest this money, this is when we're going to earn that back. I don't consider that an ROI. I really consider that a payback period. So I think there's a little bit of a misnomer around ROI.
That's an important distinction. Mark, can you answer that in terms of conversion to XML, content conversion?
Right. So I think I agree with Barry on that it's very difficult. Most companies don't really calculate ROI very well, or partly because you can't predict the future. And we've sort of talked about this a few times now. There's that opportunity cost of, what is that product going to be and how quickly is it going to take off. The other thing is it usually leaves out the cost of what you're doing currently. So it's very hard to determine, once you change your way of doing things, what is that going to do to the money you're spending right now. So that's usually not included. And there's a third item here is, what if you don't do this? Are you going to be able to stay in business? The world is changing. If you're not going to be flexible to be there 6 months from now, 12 months from now. So ROI is sort of like a very difficult, I'm not sure, it may not be as relevant now as it was in the past, because things are moving so quickly. And also I think, I know Barry's talking about what is the payback period. I think we underestimate the payback period also, because we're not counting what it is, those hidden opportunities that are, and the ability to be able to move into next. So a lot of times, really the decision is going to be based on a vision of what you see the future looking like, and how optimistic you are that things are going, that you're going to have opportunities. So I think people, put too much stock in that. It's really, sometimes it's a necessity of being in business, and it's a necessity to be able to do that next thing.
Yeah, and sometimes the ROI is you'll be in business, right?
Sometimes it is.
Okay, we have, looks like we have about a minute each for each of you to answer our final question. And Barry, it's the same question that I'm going to pose to each of you. So what can I do right now to get my digital revenue to increase?
Well, I think there's two things. One of them is exploring partnerships in the industry. Again, this is in talking with our clients. When you talk to the aggregators or distributors, you can develop new channels of revenue that you hadn't anticipated before. So just understanding the types of relationships you want in the industry to distribute your content to. So that'd be one thing. And the second thing is, if you do have your content in XML, to really start thinking about derivative products. And it goes back to a comment that Mark made earlier. Derivative products are taking a book and maybe reordering some things, or taking sections of the book and putting it in a new format, or whatever it is, creating a new topic. But creating that subset of the original container, whether it's a book, a journal, or whatever, allows you to create new products on the fly, and frankly can drive a new revenue stream.
All right.
And I just want to caution, the question itself of what can I do right now may be a difficult question, because sometimes what you can do sometimes these things take a little more time than right now. I think you do have to think, I don't think that 5-year plan is effective anymore, but I think you do need to look at what you do over the next 6 and 12 months. Immediately, rather than taking the whole thing in one shot, maybe you do pick what is the most likely places that you can do something quickly, the most important books, the ones that can get out there the quickest, the ones that you can work with partnerships that can do some of those things just as a pilot. But I think you really do need to look at the larger stream of CMS, getting your data into a normalized form like XML, and just how you're going to get it to a point where you can work with it so that 6 months down the line and 9 months down the line you can produce new products quickly and take advantage of all those opportunities.
All right. Well, thank you both very much. We are just coming up to on the hour, and I want to thank everyone for taking part in today's webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time to fill out our survey. Please stay in touch with us. I know we'll be in touch with you. We'll be continuing this series as well as the survey going into 2013. You can stay apprised of our activities via our websites, rsicms.com and dclab.com. Thank you everyone today. Have a great afternoon,